All right, I got Dr. Yasmeen Elamir on the show. She's a triple board certified in endocrinology, internal medicine, and obesity medicine, and national board certified health and wellness coach and best-selling author. I could just go on and on. Dr. Yasmeen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on here today.
Excited to talk with you. I know one of your big passions right now is type 2 diabetes, and excuse me, type 2 diabetes and the obesity epidemic is so important. I'm so happy that people like you are out there paving the way for people, because I can't remember what the stats were, but I mean, I think in July of 2022, a study came out saying that I think 97% of Americans are suffering from metabolic disorder. Well, that's a problem. And then Dr. Yasmeen, I think 70% of the people that dealt with COVID and that ended up in the hospital, that were hospitalized because of it, all had metabolic dysfunction. So we got a problem. We got a big problem. But I'm always curious, like, how did you get started into this world?
Yeah, so I kind of grew up into this world. My dad's a type 2 diabetic, and so his dad's a type 2 diabetic, and 4 out of 5 of his siblings were type 2 diabetics. And then I became a type 2 diabetic. And so my dad is a physician, and I always knew I was going to be a physician. I was going to work with him and be the same type of doctor he is. He's a lung doctor, pulmonologist. And then I got gestational diabetes, and they said, forget it, I want to live. And so that's how I got into endocrinology in general. And then it happened to be that during my, training, I was in Mount Sinai for my fellowship. And at the time, that's when the pandemic hit. And so at that time, right, we started seeing so many diabetics coming through the woodwork, just an increase in rates, and then a lot of metabolic dysfunction. And so, we were into, research, obviously there, trying to look at what could help with all the people who were dying at the time. And we looked at activated vitamin D in these patients and saw, not only were they, doing better during COVID, but they were also living better and had less complications like diabetes after. And so it really became my whole life at that point. I just really, besides fixing myself, really wanted to help those who have diabetes. I think once you've gone through it, you really have a very good understanding of how terrible of a disease it is. And then when you see people in your family, like 3 out of 5 of my dad's siblings have died from complications of diabetes. So dialysis, one died from heart disease, and then one died from stroke. So when you see these kind of diseases just destroy families, it's very easy to become passionate about it.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy that you're doing it. Quick question, because you always hear type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease, but you come from a lineage of qualified doctors. You're yourself practicing medicine, and looking back at it, is it people could say to you, well, just don't eat better food, Dr. Yasmeen, duh, right? But it's like, now, I mean, when you were in it, was it just that easy? Just eat better food?
Well, it's so frustrating for a few reasons. One, like you said, my dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse. Two of my dad's brothers who died from diabetes were doctors. And so I was put on a low carb diet from the time I could remember. They always wanted to prevent that from happening to me. And so when it did, I felt like my entire world crashed down because I believed that, if I just ate a certain way, this would not happen to me. And when it did, it was a big wake up call that the medical system didn't really have it all down yet. And so that was the first part. And that's what happens to most diabetics. They come in, they get diagnosed, and they get told, lose weight, exercise more, and here's a script for metformin. That's
Yeah.
basically how it goes. And if they get a, referral to a nutritionist, they're lucky. But the problem is the American Diabetes Association, their guidelines, I think they're a little bit flawed. I think their recommendations, they recommend, maybe a higher carb diet or eating constantly, 5 meals a day, and these kind of things that just don't necessarily move the needle with diabetes, And so then after COVID, that proved, we see this huge, increase with diabetes, that it has a lot more to do with other things as well. There's so many causes of diabetes, and that's because the main cause for diabetes is insulin resistance, right? And so meaning you have insulin, you make good insulin, but it's not working where it should. And so in the cell, right, insulin's supposed to open up the cell, glucose is supposed to go in, give us energy. And when that doesn't happen, that's type 2 diabetes. But there's 1,000 reasons a cell door might not open, or there's 1,000 reasons why the receptors on that door don't open. And it's much more than just too much sugar. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit, because what you're saying is if the cell is not opening up, right, to accept that insulin, then we have insulin resistance essentially. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but essentially that's like what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, it could be, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Well, it is. It's that simple in a nutshell. What's complicated is understanding all the different factors that affect that, right? And
That
so,
create this closed door syndrome that you're talking
yes,
about.
exactly. So, and I would think of it the same way you think about a real door, right? You have a doorknob, but you have stuff in front of the door, behind the door, right? Maybe it's a jar, right? There's a thousand things that could be affecting it. It could be a rusty nail, the thousand things that could be going on. But the way I look at it is, you know, yes, one of the reasons it could be, right, is something like too much sugar and overstrained pancreas, right? That it has to deal with too much. But it could just be something as simple as your liver, right? Our liver deals with a lot of our glucose, right? Gluconeogenesis and everything like that, or adrenal glands or stress glands. It could be our gut health. It could be as simple, yes, maybe our weight, right? So they show people who lose a certain amount of weight can reverse diabetes, but that's for certain people. Not everyone who's diabetic is obese. Not everyone who is a normal weight isn't diabetic. So, it's one of those factors. But when you have a disease that we know affects every cell of the body, right? We see the complications is multifold, right? It could be the brain for stroke, the kidney for, end stage renal disease, right? And dialysis, or heart disease, or neuropathy and amputations. The point is that diabetes affects every cell, and it's just a matter of which part of the body it's affecting first that ultimately winds up killing you or affecting your quality of life. And so that's why, with diabetes, you have to do everything possible early to affect, stop those complications.
I love what you're saying because I always tell clients, I always think of like all the toxins and everything we're exposed to, right? And I know you do a lot in that world too. And I remember there was a couple of years ago, I was doing some research, and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, on their website, Yasmeen, it says that you are being bombarded by 86,000 man-made chemicals every year, and I'm just like, where do you think those go? Like, who has to process that? And so you're talking about the liver does, like your liver has to process all these, and you mentioned the liver as well. But I was just thinking too, you have a background in endocrinology, and you said something really important early on, just something we're talking about toxins and sugar and diet. But what I was going to say is that diet is just one thing. Diet is a stressor that stresses the cell. But diet and exercise, last time I checked, doesn't remove toxins from the cell, from the actual cellular. So like you
Yeah.
could be beating your head as hard as you want. I'm just dieting and exercise. I'm intermittent fasting. I'm doing all these things, and yet you're getting no results. Is that kind of what you're saying? You're talking about too?
Definitely. It's so frustrating. Yes, I have diabetics that come in and the first thing I will ask them about the diet. I'll be like, what did you have for breakfast, lunch, dinner yesterday? Right? Just to give me a good snapshot. I always say yesterday because people will say something and maybe, there's a little bit of that. But basically, right, they tell me what they eat. And if it's something atrocious, right? Yes, sure. If we just, keep it simple, removing things, like soda and these kind of things, some people can reverse things like that. And
Yeah.
that's one layer. But then after that, there's other layers. I know people who have been trying for years, right? Doing the right diets. And then that's sure enough when I see these kind of problems like toxicities. And so the interesting part is the research is there. So if you literally Google heavy metals or, things like glyphosate, you'll see it affects insulin receptors and insulin sensitivity. So they have studied it. It's not that it's not studied. It's just not part of the solution yet. And that's what's so frustrating is that the studies are there. Like example, arsenic. Arsenic is in our water all the time. And I see so many clients where they check for things like this and it shows up in their urine. And it's known that just arsenic exposure alone can absolutely affect your insulin receptors and insulin sensitivity. Same thing with BPA and RPFAs and all these kind of things. It's proven that it affects insulin sensitivity. So it's like, why wouldn't you remove those things and target it from every angle? And so that's the approach I like to take is just not only the diet and lowering the sugar, because that's very important, right? Sugar is inflammatory and inflammation itself can, keep that cell door closed, but also targeting these other causes that aren't part of the traditional medical model.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that you're doing that. You're taking really a holistic approach when you're looking at everything. It's so key, and not a lot of people, even in the diabetes world, people that are doing great stuff, helping people, they're not even looking at toxins. They're looking at calories in, calories out. It's just very. I'm not saying they don't get results. I'm just saying I think it's myopic, right? I think.
I
There's so
think
much
we
more we
see
could do.
crazy results in our program. We'll see like the A1C when people are really focused or like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I mean, we'll see it in 3 months drop down from 15 to 5.7 very quickly. There's certain people, if they do everything. Now, obviously, it's a lot of overwhelm with this step. And so trying to make this step by step and doing first the things that move the needle the most, right? First is always the most important. But then once people get to a certain level and they're really ready to try to reverse this thing, then going to that next level, and getting there, that's the best part. So for me personally, when I had diabetes, what happened for me was first, obviously, I needed to, change my diet. I was in residency at the time when I was diagnosed. And so after I did that, I lowered the sugar, right? But then the next step was honestly tackling things like overeating, the root cause of it, because I think there's so much in the news now, especially with the Ozempics and Manjaros out in the market, tackling, overeating. It's a big problem because the food that they put is so addictive. Like you saw the Super Bowl, you see the commercials, and they're advertising for alcohol, which newsflash, you can't reverse diabetes with alcohol. It just won't happen. There is no quick fix there.
Dang.
Unfortunately, I don't have a solution for that. But they'll advertise all these things in our environment. I would say is toxigenic and obesogenic. It's meant
Mm,
to make us sick, and so the reality is. Those foods are made to make us addicted. Even the colors they use, like red, orange, yellow, is meant to make us crave food. Like if you think about McDonald's, look at those colors. Those are
mm.
meant to make us hungry. You've never seen a blue restaurant. And the reason why is because the only food that's blue is blueberries, right? And that's why you're never craving those. So the reality is that
Blueberry got the bad end of the stick. Darn.
it did. It's the only
Yeah.
one. So there's no restaurants with it. And so, anyways, the point is that you have to tackle those causes too. So after I did that, I stopped yo-yo, with my weight, which was up and down, kind of that, screw it mentality. I'll wait till Monday to try again. And, that was a big part of it too. And then the third layer for me was definitely finding a holistic practitioner to check my toxicities.
Yeah.
So once I did that and, removed that, now if I have carbs, my sugar doesn't spike. And that's what I call true reversal, is where you can incorporate things like that back in and then your sugar doesn't go crazy. Before, if I looked at a carb, my sugar would go nuts.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you. I want to go back on that second step you talked, but also, I had just interviewed a water expert just the other day, and we went to the EWG's website, and this is just a point to what you're talking about arsenic. And I've actually switched to distilled water in my household recently in the last 3 years. But one of the interesting things is, so I'm not too worried about it. But anyways, we went to the EWG's website. I typed in my zip code, and we looked at all the EWG will give you the top contaminants in your area that is out of range. And then it gives you like the top like 8 or whatever that are like way out of range. And arsenic, for example, cadmium, it was, Yasmeen, it was like 1,000 times beyond the range. And just imagine, I mean, I'm drinking distilled, but not everyone's like me and you and me. I mean,
Well, I
imagine
grew
what
up
they're
on
putting in their
tap
body every
water.
day.
I grew up on tap water. My mom, she was, my mom's, I'm from New Jersey, and my mom's we say I'm half Egyptian. My dad's Egyptian. My mom's from Jersey City, New Jersey. So they say I'm half Jersey, half Egyptian. She's one of those. And we'd go out
Yeah.
to eat, and she'd be like, tap water's fine. And, and so I hear you. I was raised on tap water. I think it's one of the reasons I may have had these problems so early, right? I was just, drinking from the tap. I didn't think much of it. And then, yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I get clients now from around the country. And so I'm starting to see these patterns on these toxicity panels. So we test, environmental toxins, heavy metals, um, and mycotoxins. And so we look at those three generic, for the most part, it's pretty comprehensive. And so when we look at that, I noticed I had two clients from Sugarland, Texas, like just as
Mm.
an example, both at high lead levels, both. And then I started looking up, the area, and I saw they were just replacing some of those pipes, and they're changing some of the rules. So I think things will get better in that respect. But obviously, testing's not covered by insurance, which is insane. And so I think there's a lot of a political movement pushing this, pushing these changes that need to happen for these things to get covered. But yeah, absolutely. Our water is, it's terrible. They don't tell us.
Yeah, and it's just something that, again, I'm the same way. I grew up the same way. And you just wouldn't think these micro cuts, but when the water is 1,000 times the amount of arsenic, I mean, guys, like just think how much that's gonna affect cumulative toxicity. Next thing you know, and then people say all the time, right? I'm 30, I'm 40. Oh, look, I'm just part of aging. It's like, no, you're inflamed. Big difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're exactly. And that inflammation is so like it's the worst part, right? Because diabetes is an inflammatory disease to begin with. And then, so it's caused by inflammation to a degree for insulin resistance. And then it's a condition that literally leads to more inflammation.
Mhm.
So nothing works when you're inflamed and you're in chronic pain. And then good luck even being able to think properly to be able to get yourself out of it. So it's really hard.
Yeah. I wanted to go back. You said something really interesting. First, you said you fixed the diet essentially, and then you fixed the cravings. But one of the things, and I was just, I had Dr. Colleen. No, she's not a doctor, actually. She should be, though. Colleen Cutcliffe. She's the founder of Pendulum Therapeutics. It's
Love
a mic,
pendulum,
yeah,
acromancia.
acromancia, and she was talking about, and you brought up gut health and cravings and these
It's funny
GLP.
because I use that probiotic. I didn't
Do
even
you?
see that. Yeah, I was going through some of your episodes. And by the way, I love your show. And
Thank you.
but yeah, that's a great probiotic.
It's a great one, right? And one of the and it's robustly studied actually, and she's very big on data and the research, like you are too. And we talk about these GLP one agonists like Ozempic and all these things. I'm just curious, have you seen that by optimizing gut health and using some of the other stuff that you do in your program, has that helped not only with like things like cravings that you're mentioning, or even reverse some chronic diseases and things like that?
Yeah, so I would say I'd answer that twofold. So for yes, for sure. So when you have your gut health, and I like to think of it like an example, like someone who's going through menopause, right? And so it doesn't mean you had bad gut health before, but say when you're going through menopause, you're losing something like estrogen, right? That this is just an example of something that can be a change in your life that can lead to something like insulin resistance and weight gain. So when we lose estrogen, our gut microbiome actually changes. Okay. And so
Mm.
when that happens, they've studied and they've seen that when you say good gut health or bad gut health, you think of it as like good bacteria, bad bacteria, right? And that good bacteria actually goes down. And so it's well studied that people who have a certain BMI or certain weight, they've studied that they have certain bacteria compared to those who do not. And so, example, Akkermansia is one of those that's seen in those who don't have obesity, and it's deficient in those with obesity. So, the idea behind a company like Pendulum, when they're using that kind of bacteria that's seen in people who aren't obese, who have good insulin sensitivity, it's genius, right? Using something like that. And that would help combat that change in those bacteria like that in those who are undergoing perimenopause. I've no doubt that that helps. Now, that also goes multifold. So when you improve your gut health with things like removing certain toxins that are known to affect the gut, right? And then you're replenishing it with good bacteria, whether it's through a probiotic or the way you're eating, you know, with like, kimchi, kefir, yogurt, whatever it is, something you're doing on the regular to give that good bacteria to your body, and fixing it, what you notice is the cravings start to change a little bit naturally. You don't like things that are sweet, but that takes time. So that ability to change the way things taste when you change those things, I know it takes about 6 weeks for most people, but
Mm.
to change the gut microbiome takes a few months. So it's not a quick fix for sure.
That's so good that you said that. And on that note, I was just thinking, what when people are working with you, right? Do you ever tell them like the kind of mindset? Because I know you have various programs that you run, but one of your programs, I think you were telling me, is 9 months,
Yeah.
and that's awesome because I love doing stuff like that because I know for sure we're gonna get to the root cause with you in 9 months, but it's a journey and most people want the quick fix and they're used to insurance, their copay, just paying their stuff and they don't get results, but they're used to that.
Yeah.
What is the kind of thing do you try to instill in people and just tell them like, listen, this is a long journey, but it's worth your health, and like, or what is the kind of the mindset that you see that people need to take on and maybe they didn't have it when they first met you?
So everyone's a little bit different, but I would say I do one of two things. If they're the kind of person who I can tell they're just not there yet, let's go with just trying to lower that sugar. Let's manage the sugar first, and then in a couple months, once the sugar comes down, right, inflammation comes down, even their their rest, their energy comes down to a certain way that they can actually process this. You know what I mean? So you have to definitely know your client or your patient, right? And so that's one way I'll do it. I'll do it the traditional medical way in my office. That's exactly what I do, right? They come, A1C is very high. You know what I mean? We do lifestyle, we do medications, we lower it, and then I say, okay, are you happy with where you are now? Or are you trying to get off these medications? You know, what? Let's get to the first level first. We have to control the sugar. Fine. Then if it's someone who is like, I've been through the medical model, you know, and they come to me from, you know, all over the country, right? I've done the medical model. I want off this medication, right? That's a person that's like, okay, here's the deal. It's not going to be quick. Let's test you first. And then I think when you see the testing and you see, oh my gosh, I have 25 toxins in my body, you know, at least for me, when I saw that, I was like, there's no way I'm not doing something about this. Do you know what I mean? Because how can I heal? How can my body heal and deal with insulin again if I'm in this toxic environment in my body, right? It's very hard to imagine that going well for me.
It had to be comforting to know that there was more going on than just, oh, I don't have enough willpower and I'm just a bad person and that's why I have type 2 diabetes. It's like, oh no, like there's actually something literally biologically, physiologically wrong with me. I need to fix these things.
100%. And I think the other thing I do is when I look at labs, you know, when you get blood work, right, and you look at a bunch of blood work every day, most people who get blood work, you know, are they healthy or are they sick? Well, usually sick, right?
Yeah.
Healthy people don't get blood work. So those averages, right? A lot of it is derived based on the people who are getting it, you know, the normal averages. And so what I've learned over the years is looking at it from a functional perspective, which is the normal functional range for a lot of these markers. And then also looking at markers that are outside just your A1C, you know, things like your inflammatory markers, you know. And so I think when you look at things like that and it's showing inflammation, or when you look at you know, the functional range for normal, you know, kidney function, liver function, then you start to open up and see I'm not optimized. I'm not functioning at my best capacity to deal with sugar, you know, and then aiming for that will also move the needle and get people realizing something else is wrong. But it has to, you have to be ready and, you know, and so you just are kind of there for them and support them best you can. And then when they're ready, they're ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk to you about hormones. And you're an endocrinologist, you know, might know a thing or two about hormones. And I think a lot of people don't understand that there's hormone receptors, sites that sit on the outer membrane of the cell. And so you were talking about insulin being one, but there's other ones, estrogen, testosterone, thyroid. I mean, all these things. And you even were talking about just how you noticed vitamin D correlation with people's and during the pandemic, and right. And how that correlates to diabetes. And vitamin D is like a pro hormone, is it not? So it's like,
Yeah.
what are you seeing when it comes to hormones and a lot of your clients coming through? How relevant is that, I guess?
Yeah. So when I see a few things, so vitamin D deficiency, right? That is so prevalent all over our country now. And so the reality is, yes, we get some through the sun, but the reality is the majority, right? We're supposed to be getting definitely through our gut. And so what I notice is a huge influx, especially after pandemic and especially with the foods we eat, because 70% of the foods we eat as Americans is processed, right? And so what I'm seeing is leaky gut. So basically what I mean by that is I'll get their metabolic panel and I'll get, you know, their vitamins and things like this. And I see they're deficient. So I'll see vitamin D low. And even though I'll ask them, I'm like, are you getting supplementation? Yes, they're getting supplementation. And I'm like, okay, well, you have very expensive urine. So, but let's, you know, take care of the gut. When we take care of the gut, you know, they need less supplementation, all these kind of things. So that's one aspect of it. But then when we look at, you know, receptors, right? We have our vitamin D receptor, and we also have, you know, our different receptors like, you know, for cortisol or for, you know, our insulin receptor, estrogen, testosterone. What I notice is there's so many things affecting this that people don't know are affecting it. So one good example, like marijuana, right? There's a big trend, I think, toward maybe CBD, right? And I'm all about a lot of holistic trends, but the ones that have THC, this can affect testosterone, right?
Mm.
Directly lowers it. And so I have so many of my clients who are diabetic kind of blaming maybe diabetes on maybe, you know, their hormones and things. But then you find out there's other lifestyle things that are outside of food that are affecting them. And then you fix that 3 to 6 months later. Again, hormones take forever to fix. They're not quick. Then
Mm.
you notice, you know, libido and all these kind of things go up. their energy goes up and their sugar happens to get better. So what I would say is we were designed for sure to heal. The less is more, right? So we want to definitely try to stick with just whole foods, anti-inflammatory foods, and really avoiding things that hurt the gut. So if you don't have a gluten, intolerance, maybe you have a gluten sensitivity. That doesn't necessarily mean gluten is good for you, right? So maybe try it out and see how your gut does, see if the vitamin D goes up. Take advantage of those labs you can get, for sure.
Yeah. What about just women and hormones, and especially you had mentioned perimenopause, menopause, estrogen dominance. I know is a big one for women, and if a woman's trying to lose weight and she's estrogen dominant, good luck, right?
Yeah, good
Right.
luck.
And I mean, I'm sure that, and there's probably a lot of stuff that you see in the type 2 diabetes world with that as well. And I got to be honest, I don't see Western conventional medicine solving estrogen dominance for women and helping them. Are you able to help women in those kind of more difficult situations too, hormonally, and as well as their type 2 diabetes?
What I also notice, I notice a few things that happen. So I see things from both ends. I see people on hormones, right? And sometimes people need hormones. They need like things like estrogen when they need it, or they need precursors of that. I see a lot of functional practitioners using, different precursors, right? But sometimes when you try to, balance the seesaw, right? I would say of estrogen, testosterone as a woman, right? These precursors can become testosterone dominant too. And
Mm.
so what is I think very important is just removing precursors that shouldn't be there. So, example, things like soy in the beginning is a really good way to clear those elimination pathways. And so, when I say elimination pathways, I mean things like the liver and the gut, all those kind of things, because that can really cause an estrogen predominance, or plastics. So when I see
Mm.
people using a lot of plastics, that definitely is an endocrine disruptor, very big. Or eating organic when you can. There's a lot of these toxins that completely mess up our hormones. And so Astrazine example is one, and so that one is studied in frogs, or atrazine, sorry. There's so many of them, and they all like are dioxide, this and this, and I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
saying, and I'm like, that was wrong, atrazine. So, anyways, they studied in frogs, okay, and when you get this disruptor, it turns male frogs into female frogs, and not only that, it makes them able to reproduce. So, it's crazy, right? So, can you imagine that stuff in our bodies? What's happening? So, I really like to do a cleanup of all things first. So I get a whole lifestyle list, right? If there's marijuana, remove it. Let's remove soy for a bit. Let's remove these toxins. And then once we do that, let's give your body 3 to 6 months and see what happens. That's a nice way to do it, to see if we can remove that dominance without actually having to manipulate them with hormones first.
Yeah. Love that. And again, get into the root cause, right? Not trying to put a band-aid on it. And again, sometimes people need hormones. I get that too. But
Oh
if we
yeah,
can,
like if you're having a hot flash, let's fix that, right? That's
yeah.
miserable. You can't sleep. We're not playing that game. No, no, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me. I probably should have started off with this, but I wait to the end. You wrote an entire book on an anti-inflammatory diet, right?
Yes.
Talk about just the anti-inflammatory diet and like why I know you decided to write it with another author. What was the impetus behind that? And like, obviously
Yeah.
we want to have a diet is important when it comes to type 2 diabetes, but yeah, talk about just the book. And then I want to ask you some more questions about diet.
Yeah, so I wrote it with my husband, and so what I noticed is, if we could be preventative, an anti-inflammatory diet is a great way to prevent diabetes, if you have that kind of background, especially genetically and predisposition, and just in general. I think we're in a society where a lot of people are in a lot of pain, and so an anti-inflammatory diet is a diet where it's mostly just whole foods. That's the first number one rule. Not processed. And then it can go as far as no dairy, gluten free, soy free, these kind of things. And so this is kind of what goes into it. Think lean meats and vegetables, a lot of vegetables. I would say for diabetics, we kind of can sometimes get into this low carb thing to a degree where we wind up adding a lot of inflammation when we try to go low carb alone. And
Mm.
that can be detrimental long term. Short term, it can lower the sugar. But if you're just trying to go low carb and you're eating a ton of cheese, or you're trying to go low carb and you're only eating, fatty meats and not having vegetables because you're trying to be a carnivore, long term, that's going to cause problems. And so that's where an anti-inflammatory diet comes in key. The diet's not made for diabetics in the sense of, in the book, the recipes do include, a decent bit of carbs, and someone who's trying to acutely lower the sugar, it may not work for them, but I would say it's a great preventative measure. And then we also wrote a sleep book, and I'll put it this way, it just goes to show, the sleep book I think is the better book, by the way. It's all
Okay.
about how to
Whoops.
naturally,
Sorry.
sorry, that's not my bestseller, but what I would say is, I wanted a natural sleep book because we have so many people coming in asking for two things, right? Pain medication and Ambien for sleep. So the anti-inflammatory diet was to try to help that because, right, prevent that being one of the most common things people come in with. And then the other thing is sleep, right? Everyone asking for Ambien. Well, what have you done to try to help your sleep, right? Holistically. And what supplements could you use that are natural and are not going to cause a dependence issue, So my husband and I are both passionate about preventative care. And so the point is that the sleep book doesn't sell as well as the other. And it's because we're obsessed with food as a society, right? We can't help it. We're made from the
Sleep when
TV
you die, right?
Yeah, sleep when you
Yeah.
die, which is the worst thing for diabetes. I don't think it's a coincidence that I was a resident, right, working 24-hour shifts, working overnight when I developed diabetes. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. I didn't sleep
Yeah.
at all. So, yeah, definitely. Just as important, moves the needle. I've had people where I just only change their sleep and their diabetes starts to reverse. Literally just change them from night schedule to day schedule. That's
Yeah.
it. They change nothing else and they get better. So it is interesting. Your lifestyle matters a lot. And anti-inflammatory diet, I think a Mediterranean anti-inflammatory diet and low carb diet combined is the best thing you could do as a diabetic.
At least in the beginning, you would say.
Yep. And then once your carb tolerance increases, when you really get to the root cause, then you can start incorporating more carbohydrates again. But in the beginning, when you want to first lower that sugar, a low carb diet is necessary, definitely.
Yeah. I love that you said that. Because I mean, I have no dog in the fight. I just, whatever works and whatever people can do sustainably long term and works with their individuality, I think is really good. I remember I had a guy on my podcast, PhD, a doctor, also works with diabetics. And this guy, he's type 1 diabetic, actually. So he has to, like, he knows his insulin levels really well. And they do a really good job. And, but he has up to 600 to 700 carbs a day. And he's like dialed in. But like he
Yeah.
said, I think something that you said, you have to be carb tolerant. And you won't get there right away. He said it's going to take a little bit of time, but you can get there.
It takes time. It takes a lot of time. And, and for type 2 diabetics, it's a little bit different, right? Because we're insulin resistant, right? So we need insulin to deal with carbs. So we have our three macros: protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And so protein requires a little bit of insulin, not too much. Fat requires none at all. And then, carbs need the most. And so when we have insulin, right, and it's not working, that's a problem because what insulin does is it tells the glucose to go to three places, for the most part, the liver, our fat, and our muscle. And so what happens is if it's not working, it's going to go to the liver, right? And that's going to be a problem. That's where we get fatty liver and eventually cirrhosis. And then if it goes to the fat, well, then it's contributing to, obesity and weight gain. And that's always a problem. So basically what we want to do is try to counteract, even things like that, like increasing muscle so that we can uptake the glucose better, reverse our insulin resistance. But the idea is that you want to basically go from insulin resistant to insulin sensitive and work on each of these things: the liver, the muscle, your gut, every single thing that deals with your sugar, so we can move the needle from insulin resistant to insulin sensitive. And when that happens, that's when carbs don't matter so much because we have insulin that works again. So we have to fix it at a cellular level by fixing every single organ and every single part of the body that has to do with that. If you do that, then the carbs can work because the cell will, get opened up by the insulin. That's simple.
Yeah. So with I love that way you explain it. And again, I love what you also mentioned, like everything's working in systems in the body, and people and I've gone down that route too and made mistakes, and I probably still do make mistakes, but where it's like, you just think, oh, I just got to take this one thing, but you're only really focusing on one area of the body. But if the body is connected from the brain all the way down, and if you're just working on one thing, you're going to miss things. The body is talking to each other from the liver to the fat cells, everything that you said to the brain. And so, yeah, I love how your work. When it comes when you're working with people on diet, are you pretty just are you pretty what's the word, we're agnostic in the sense where You just work on with their bio-individuality, or do you like to do a lot of diet rotation with folks, keto, carnivore, Mediterranean, or how does that work when with the customization?
Yeah. So basically, the first thing is I need to assess their ability to do what they said they're going to do, right? Because if someone, doesn't or doesn't have control with that, right? Then we have to take a totally different approach. So I usually start with this. I don't go into too much detail, but I'll start with just like a piece of paper and I'll put 3 circles for 3 meals. And I'll just break it down into like maybe half protein, half carbs, half protein, or half vegetable, quarter protein, quarter carbs, for lunch, and then like lean, clean, and mean at night, and just see if they can do it. Have them come back in a couple days, and then they bring me what they did, and then okay, from that, and they bring me a diary. If they don't bring me a diary, right, and they can't tell me what they ate the day before, I need to work more maybe on cravings and emotional eating and more of that kind of thing. Maybe it is just that lifestyle part. If they come in and they're like, boom, 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 boom. I'm not eating any carbs. I'm being really restrictive. Okay, then I have to think a little bit more like, do I need to kind of change things up, trick the body a bit? What I have to do, right? Carb cycling is huge. That's like that was such a help for me, at least personally. I personally carb cycle now.
Because you were always low carb, like you said, right? Even as a
Yeah, and it
yeah.
didn't work, right? That was a bummer. I really thought I thought when I'm one of those like 8-year-olds trading my lunch, you know what I mean? Because I have like this low carb lunch and I'm like trying to trade it for a Lunchable. And then I was like, no, no, no. When I was 12, I was like, I'm gonna be serious about this. And then I was like, I'm good to go. And then I became an adult and I was like, no way, that didn't work. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I was
All these
cheated.
years, I got gypped out on good meals.
Yeah, no Lunchables for me for no reason. And
Yeah.
then the little pizza Lunchables, the ones
Yeah.
where they put the tomato sauce.
Oh
I
yeah.
used to like want those so badly as a child. Anyways, so I didn't do it thinking that was going to prevent it, but it didn't work. So what I would say is it really depends on what they're doing. Their original log, if I give them a log, what happens? Because it tells me, do I need to target emotional eating? Do I need to just
Hmm.
target the carbs? They just have very high carb diet, right? That is overstraining the pancreas. It doesn't mean that's not a root cause. It is affecting certain people. And then obviously, if they're going through menopause or perimenopause, I do switch it up because we do know, right, for someone in that position, things are a little bit different. The protein intake is going to change because I know they're losing muscle mass quickly. So my focus is a lot about muscle, fixing their muscle mass ASAP.
Mm.
If they're younger, like in their 20s, like me, I know it's happening more and more. Type 2 diabetics who are in their 20s. You're not just type 1 if you're in your 20s anymore, right? Then a lot of it, especially with my young guys, is a lot about cleaning up. You know what I mean? We just need to clean it up a little bit. Too much partying, maybe too much alcohol, right? It's got to go.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
Yeah, love that. One thing I wanted to mention, going back to just sleep, I remember there was a study showing blue light and how blue light, and you can see it on even on a continuous glucose monitor, and everybody knows now. I think we're surrounded by this blue light that's just so intoxicating. But I remember I had a CGM on once, and like just one night of like staying up slightly later, and then it was elevated, and then the next night I went to bed like early, like I normally did, had the lights off at 9 o'clock and early, and you saw a dramatic dip. So to your point, I mean, imagine being in a hospital like 24 hours, like overnight with just the toxic LED light just shining on you. Like, of course you're having spikes. And then when you're supposed to be like actually asleep, your body's supposed to be in repair mode and it's not, it's turned on. So
Well, it's so true because like think about anyone who's married or anyone who's had a baby, right, with someone who's been married. You see your wife having baby and you're in the hospital and you're both exhausted, right? The first time a lot of us are in a hospital is when we have our first kid. And so you're supposed to be in this healing environment, right? And you have this hospital light on you. And it was the first time I was hospitalized. And I will tell you, yeah, those lights are terrible. That really did not do it for me. Didn't do it for my sugar, that's for sure. And
yeah.
then, but it's funny. I think the best thing when people reverse their diabetes, I had a patient or client recently, online client who had undergone diverticulitis, so like inflammation of her colon from like basically an infection she had gotten, and she was so happy. She's like, "This is how I know I reversed my insulin resistance. I was in the hospital and my sugar was perfect. They were checking my sugar, wanting to give me insulin, and I didn't need one unit." And so that's pretty stellar. So yes, if you have your body at a baseline place where you're in a really good place, you can handle, we're meant to handle stress, right? God, like, or whatever you believe in, right? We were divinely definitely created to handle stressors. But when we have them over and over and over, so meaning watching TV late night every night, on the phone every night, that's when things become a big problem,
Yeah.
and so it's really your everyday habits, those micro habits. You don't have to be perfect, right? You can have outliers like days in the hospital, things like this. But when things are every day, that's when things fall apart.
Yeah, so good. Can you talk about just what your program looks like and what you have? I know you have various programs actually, but if people are just loving our conversation, they want to reach out to you, they want to connect with you. Like, how can they go about working with you?
Yep. So the easiest way I would say to get started with me now is we are launching our app. And so our type 2 diabetes transformation app. And so we do everything from beginner level where you're just trying to manage your sugar all the way, to coaching individually to personalized detoxification protocols. So basically to diabetes reversal. So wherever you are, or if you're just trying to stop emotional overeating or over craving or mindless eating and trying to get back on track, it's an app for you. And it has everything, including, an entire resource vault, all about the medications you're likely on or they're telling you to go on, all the things and supplements, everything you want to know. I jam pack it all in there.
Wow.
So I would say that would be the best place to start if you're wanting to work with me. And Joel, I'm gonna, if it's okay, can I give you the website? We're starting our list now for pre-launch, and so
Oh,
those who
cool.
sign up for the pre-launch for the app will get exclusive bonuses when they sign up, so they'll be the first to know.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, great. So, and I just want to make sure I have this here.
When's the actual launch going to be? I know this is pre-launch. When are you expecting it?
We were expecting it actually this week. We had something with the App Store. Apple had a couple criteria that we had to fix real quick with our, tech, things
Yeah,
that were above my pay grade. I do
I've had
tech.
that happen in my own app, so I totally get that. Yeah, those things happen.
Yeah, exactly. But March 1st, I'm hoping.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
And then, and so basically type 2. So the website is type 2 diabetesremission.com. Okay. So
Boom.
type 2 diabetesremission.com if you want to join the wait list. And I
Amazing.
would love to work with you. I'm excited. Come join
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, very cool. And then also, yeah, where are you at on social? Also, where are you most? Are you mostly on Instagram? If people want to just follow you and connect that way as well.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram under diabetes_MD. And then I'm on YouTube. I do a weekly YouTube just about diabetes and obesity, and that's under diabetes_MD. And then if you're a podcaster like me and like to take walks and listen to a podcast, my podcast name is The Diabetes Fix. And it's all about diabetes and weight loss. So those are the best ways to connect with me for sure.
So good. Dr. Yasmine, tell me, I didn't ask you this earlier, but I was just thinking, what, any like crazy testimonials you had, or just like somebody that came in and, it might be one of those it's not just like they just reversed type 2 diabetes. It's like, no, they reversed type 2 diabetes, but then their neuropathy went away and then, or their arthritis went away, or like something where, you just never, they could have probably never imagined in a million years that all these things could have happened by fixing. I don't want to say this one thing because you do more than one thing with the toxicity profile and everything you're doing. It's multifaceted, but yeah, any like crazy ones that stuck out for you?
Yeah, I have a couple. One I have is one of my clients, and thank God she signed for her testimonials. But Denise, she's one of my long-term clients, and so she had been diabetic 34 years, and so she came to me to reverse her diabetes and weight loss, and she was on 180 units of insulin a day, so 90 of a long-acting insulin, and then 30 with each meal. And so she felt she was never going to be able to get off of it, but in 3 months flat, she got off all her insulin, all of it, and now she's down to her college weight. So before she was even married. And so
Wow.
it just goes to show for a lot of us, insulin resistance is the root cause of us gaining weight. That's not for everyone. The cause of gaining weight can be multifold, just like diabetes and insulin resistance. Weight is so multifaceted, and I think people don't understand that. They think, oh, if I just fix one thing like insulin resistance, that's part of it, but there's a lot to it. And so she fixed all those causes, and she was very, very committed. And then I think my other case that I'm loving the best right now, recent case that I'm seeing, when I evaluate people, I evaluate how much insulin they make by a level called C-peptide. A lot of people do insulin levels, but they can be up and down all the time. And so I like C-peptide because when you secrete insulin, it goes to, proinsulin, C-peptide, and C-peptide is a very stable marker to check. And so that will tell me if it's low, it may mean that you're not making good insulin anymore, right? That we've overstrained the pancreas to the point that you're not making good insulin. Well, this person on my protocol, only in a month, right, is already dropping their doses of insulin, just completely just dropping it. Like they're dropping low every day, meaning now they're able to eat carbs and the sugar's not spiking.
Mhm.
So that is probably the best one. Recheck the C-peptide level 3 months later, and literally it's already coming up. So it just goes to show sometimes the reason maybe the pancreas isn't functioning is a little bit more multifaceted than just overburning the pancreas. So yeah, I would say if you've never tried to reverse your insulin resistance or reverse, the fact that you're not making good insulin anymore, I would definitely check stuff like this out. It's worth trying, right?
So good. Yeah, I just love what you're saying because I hope this gives people hope because again, from social media, it's like all we ever hear is just calories in, calories out. And if you're not losing weight, you're a lazy piece of crap. And I mean, I've heard of C-peptide, but I didn't know even just in layman terms, like the way you explain it, I never understood it that well. So, so good. It's just so good. Last one, I want to ask you just a couple last minute questions and then we'll wrap things up. But you got the app coming out. Any other exciting projects that we should be aware of? I mean, that's a huge undertaking, but any other new books or anything else you can divulge and let us know about that, what to expect to come?
We are working on an anti-inflammatory diet book for diabetics, so geared toward where you are in your journey, because that is something we've been wanting to do. And so we were waiting. It took us a little bit of time because the anti-inflammatory diet book did do so well. We just released our Spanish version and German version this year. And so
Wow.
so that'll be coming out, down in the next year. And then, yeah, that's the biggie. I'm focusing on this app and coaching and honestly just trying to reach as many diabetics as I can, and making it the most accessible, way, you know what I mean? So something where regardless of, for cost, something that it's affordable for everyone.
Yeah. So good. Dr. Yasmine, any questions that I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
No, honestly, you covered it all. I'm just so impressed. I feel like you have such a great knowledge. And on your show, I can't believe the experts you have here. I love it. I'm going to be a
Yeah.
lifelong listener. I'm a big fan. I'll
Oh,
take you
wow.
on my walk
Thanks.
after dinner.
Okay, cool. Don't tell your husband. That sounds weird. Okay.
No, I meant to lower my glucose.
That's,
15-minute walk after dinner.
that's
Oh,
right.
man.
That's
I'm
right.
that much
Yeah.
of a nerd. I didn't even see that coming.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
good.
yeah, after dinner, if you do a 15-minute walk after dinner, you will literally uptake your glucose 50% more. So literally your muscle, right? Remember we said insulin signals to the muscle uptake the glucose? That's very, very important. And so if you can move after a meal, you will literally see with the same meal the day before, the sugar drop 50% more. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Anyways, go
No,
for a
that's
walk, listen to a podcast. That's what I
absolutely
do.
so good. I've tested that with CGMs and I've seen that exactly what you're saying. I've seen that work. And it's so funny because ancient cultures like Italians, I mean, they would
Yeah.
take a passeggiata. You know, it was very common to take a little walk. A mini walk is what they call it in Italian, and they would go after a little walk right after dinner. So you see a
I
lot
mean,
of
I
ancient.
went to Italy with my husband and I ate so much gelato and nothing happened. Nothing happened to my sugar. It's like amazing. The food there, the water there. I just feel like everything there just seems cleaner to me at least.
Yeah, that and probably our stress levels were way down when we were traveling in places like that. That
Yeah,
probably also helped.
I don't work in Italy. That's for sure. That's a good
Yeah,
point. Low stress is
yeah.
important.
Amazing stuff. Dr. Yasmeen Elamir, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate you so much. And then, guys, just a reminder go to type2diabetesremission.com for the app, which should be launching in the next week. Get on the pre launch list. Let's go. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you.